Here are some of the sponsors that make this conference possible. Walton Family Foundation, American Institutes for Research, Charter School Capital, College Board, Mindshift Technologies, Strata Education Network, National Heritage Academies, and National Math and Science Initiative. Everything's bigger in Texas, but you aren't going to want to miss out on next year when we go to Las Vegas, June 30th to July 3rd, 2019.
I'm a man. Yeah! I spell him H-I-N. That relevant Maine.
Good morning, Austin. I'm Andrew Broy from the Illinois Network of Charter Schools, and if you don't know, that was Muddy Waters, famous Chicagoan blues impresario. Great to join you today in the final day of this year's conference. I'm glad we have all had the chance to connect, to inspire, and recommit ourselves to our collective work of ensuring great public schools for more students across our country. A conference like this would not be possible without generous sponsors. So I want to take a moment to thank IDEA Public Schools, Mindshift, and AIR for making this conference possible. On Monday, we heard from students and teachers who have been catalysts for change in their communities and in their charter schools. Spurred by their life stories, those activists have a common thread. They've taken a challenging situation and turned it into an opportunity to help others, to empower their classmates and do big things. But this conference is really about students and communities and families, and I'm honored to be able to introduce another student today, DJ Hill, who is a 9th grade charter school student right here at Austin Achieve Academy. What DJ found at Austin Achieve is something he wasn't able to find at his district school: acceptance and the security of a community that supports his journey. But I'll let DJ share his own story with you. Please join me in welcoming DJ Hill to the stage.
No need to take from me. Don't throw the paint on me. I see the smoke forming. I got lost astray. And as far as
Good morning. My name is DJ. I'm 15, and I'm a little nervous to be on the stage, so I got this very special outfit, so hopefully I can impress you all. Typically, being so anxious, I would use the imagine your audience in their underwear tactic, but seeing as I'm in a room full of educators, I don't think that'd be a very good idea. So I hope you like what I have to say, sorry. So before I came to Austin Achieve, I had never heard an "I'm proud of you" or even a "good job." I coasted through classes, I was ignored in most places, and I felt like I had no one to talk to. Every day of 6th grade, I walked into school on my toes, ready for every worst-case scenario I had already imagined a million times in my shower. The school's population was so big, it was nearly impossible to get individual help from anyone. And when I started falling behind, there was no going back, because I didn't know where to find the resources to get tutoring. I was on my own for my entire 6th grade year, but I still managed to scrounge up a B- average. During that time, I came out to a few of my friends as gay, and it blew up in my face. I was pushed into walls, spit on, and harassed in the hallways. This led to my early withdrawal from my public middle school and my enrollment at Austin Achieve. On my first day, I immediately noticed some differences. The classes were smaller, people were friendlier, and they actually tried to get to know me. It amazed me how two schools that were only 5.6 miles apart could be so significantly different. Throughout my middle school years, I was supported endlessly and unconditionally. The support of my friends and teachers is what kept me at Austin Achieve for high school, too. In 7th grade, I felt safe at school for the first time, and the feeling of security never went away. In fact, over the years, my sense of security has actually increased. It's increased so much that I was able to stand in front of my entire 9th grade class and tell them I am female to male transgender before I was even able to do so with my own parents. This is what makes Austin Achieve so special. This is what makes charter schools so special. Creating a safe environment and sense of family within our own small communities. At Austin Achieve, I've grown so much more than I believe I ever would have anywhere else. And I've been given so many rare opportunities, such as speaking here to you all at this conference, that I couldn't have even imagined. And for that, I am eternally grateful.
Smooth sailing.
Hi, good morning. My name is Valerie Green, and it's a pleasure to stand before such a diverse and distinguished group. I represent The Wonderful Company. We're a privately held, Los Angeles-based company committed to offering high-quality and healthy brands. The company owners, Linda and Stuart Resnick, have always balanced achievement in business with a dedication to giving back, especially in the communities in which our employees live and work, and specifically, California's Central Valley. The Central Valley grows 2/3 of our nation's fruits and nuts and 1/3 of our vegetables. Sadly, the region with the highest farm revenues ranks among the poorest in the state and the nation. Among our many philanthropic works, we take particular pride in our educational commitments, including our magnificent charter school. This year, nearly 100% of our graduating class at wonderful College Prep Academy Charter School is going to college. In fact, an incredible 88% are heading to 4-year universities. And perhaps the most exciting statistic is that 86% are the first in their families to attend college. The theme of this conference is Empowered to Dream Big, and that's something we do every single day. There's no question that students from any background can achieve the most amazing things when we create a level playing field. We know that quality teaching has the greatest potential to accomplish just that, and at Wonderful, we work tirelessly to attract, develop, and retain the most incredible teachers like Mr. Seymour. We're not just empowering our students to dream big, we're dreaming big. And that is why we could not be more honored to introduce the 2017 Teacher of the Year honoree, Sydney Chaffee. Many of you will recognize Sydney as the 2017 National Teacher of the Year, a prestigious award made even more significant by the fact that she's the first public charter school teacher to be recognized with the title. Sydney has been an educator for the past decade, 9 of those years in her current role, and she is a national board certified teacher. Sydney is a humanities teacher in Boston at Codman Academy Charter Public School. Yeah! Where she inspires her students every day to dream big. In the classroom, she teaches her students how education can be a transformative tool for social justice. Using lessons from the past, Sydney empowers her students to see themselves as catalysts for change. Not only is she a phenomenal teacher, Sydney brings joy into the classroom. Learning is hard work, as we all know, but she makes coming to class a time her students look forward to. And like many outstanding educators, she fosters a strong sense of community, not only within her classroom, but within her entire school. Every Thursday, Sydney organizes a community circle where all students in every grade level can come together to celebrate successes, share good news, and dig into serious conversation together. I'm honored to welcome Sydney to the stage.
I'm so excited, I just can't hold it. I'm about to lose control,
Good morning. So I'm excited to be here to talk about empowering our students to dream big. Because to me, what that means is that we're empowering our students to work towards a better world. One that is more just and more equitable, one that's more sustainable and kinder. And so this past year, as I've traveled around the country, people have asked me what my priorities are as a teacher and what matters to me. And I've told them that I believe education can be a tool to work towards social justice. But one day last summer, I logged onto Twitter, and I saw that a fellow teacher had taken issue with these beliefs. He told me that the purpose of education is to educate, and teachers shouldn't be social justice warriors. His final argument was, I teach my subject. But I reject that simplification because teachers don't just teach subjects. We teach people. People like these. These are some of my students. When our students walk through our classroom doors, they don't leave their identities there at the threshold. Their experiences in our rooms are bound up in historical context. And so if we insist that education happens in a vacuum, we do our students a disservice. We teach them that education doesn't really matter because it's not relevant to what's happening all around them. So here's one example of what it can look like when kids do see the connection between school and life. For the past several months, students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, have been advocating for stronger gun laws. And they're not the first or the only kids to do that work, but they've been launched into the national spotlight for taking on politicians and lobbyists and special interest groups and media personalities. Their activism reminds me what can happen when our students have access to a great education. And when they understand that that education can help them work towards building a world that they want to live in. One of the teachers at the Stoneman Douglas High School is named Jeff Foster, and he's been teaching there for 20 years. He teaches AP US government. And on the day of the shooting, his lesson was focused on special interest groups. Coincidentally, part of the lesson had students looking at the typical response of the NRA following a mass shooting. And the next day, students were supposed to take a test where they demonstrated their understanding of those tactics. And then the shooting happened. And in those terrifying minutes, and in the days and the months that have followed, the intersections between what students learned in class and what they would need to know in the real world became abundantly clear. 3 days after the shooting, Emma Gonzalez gave a speech while she was holding a big sheaf of papers that were her notes from Jeff Foster's class. And she and her classmates were so fiercely well-spoken that they were accused of being crisis actors. But they're not crisis actors. They're kids. There's kids whose teachers have empowered them to understand that they can use their education to engage. Jeff Foster did an interview, and he explained why he loves to teach government. Because it's alive, he said. Stuff is happening. Jeff Foster and his students are just one example of what can happen when teachers believe that what we teach matters beyond the four walls of our classrooms. So, yeah, social justice belongs in our schools. Social justice should be a part of the mission of every school and every teacher in America if we want liberty and justice for all to be more than just a slogan. Schools are crucial places for young people to become active citizens and learn skills to work towards a more equitable society. And I'm going to let you in on a secret. Many of the skills that people need to orchestrate the kinds of change that lead to social justice are already built into the work of school. Problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, perseverance, none of this should be all that revolutionary on its own. Now combine that with an ability to understand history, not as one static, objective narrative on which we can all agree, but as a series of intertwined events about which there can be countless interpretations. If, as teachers, we deliberately choose to explore history with our students rather than just teach it, then we help them understand history as ongoing, and as tied to current movements for change. We help our students see themselves as potential players within a living history. So those are the skills I'm talking about. When I talk about equipping our kids to do social justice work, those are the skills of well-rounded scholars and of active citizens. And teachers are the ones who will help young people make the transformation into the kinds of citizens who can use those skills to effect change. Okay, so back to my new friend on Twitter. Maybe one of the reasons that he wasn't happy with my work is because he and I don't agree on the definition of justice. Maybe we just don't see eye to eye politically. And to me, our interaction actually speaks to a larger problem in America right now, which is, as adults, we don't often know how to disagree in a way that moves us forward. But here's the thing. As teachers, our aim is to empower students to articulate their own opinions, not to coerce them into agreeing with us. So it doesn't actually matter if he and I agree on what justice looks like. What matters is that we're helping our students have those conversations with one another. And that means as teachers, we've got to learn to become effective facilitators of our students' activism. We need to teach them how to have tricky conversations. We need to expose them to differing opinions. And we need to help them see the connections between what they're learning in class and their own real lives. So I'll give you an example of that from my own classroom. I teach 9th grade humanities, and every year my students and I explore the history of apartheid in South Africa as a case study of injustice. If you don't know the history of apartheid, basically it was a brutal and racist system under which everyone in South Africa was categorized according to race and people of color were oppressed. Resisting that racism meant risking one's life. And around the world, other countries' governments, including the United States, hesitated to do anything to sanction South Africa because we benefited from its resources. And then in 1976, the South African government passed a new law. And the law required that students in South Africa had to learn in the language of Afrikaans when they went to school. But Afrikaans was a white language spoken by white South Africans, and many black South Africans referred to Afrikaans as the language of the oppressor. So as you can imagine, students of color were outraged at this new law. They already attended segregated schools, where they had overcrowded classrooms and a lack of resources and a frankly racist curriculum. And now they were being expected to learn in a language neither they nor their teachers spoke. So they decided to do something about it. On the morning of June 16, 1976, thousands of kids of all ages walked out of schools in the township of Soweto, and they marched through the streets, holding hands and singing and holding signs to protest the law. They came to an intersection, and they encountered the police and the military, who ordered them to turn back. And when they refused, the police set dogs on them, and then they opened fire. Although the Soweto uprising ended in tragedy, and although apartheid itself wasn't officially struck down for almost 20 more years, the students' protest had a dramatic impact on the way the world viewed South Africa's policies. News outlets all around the world published a now iconic picture of one of the very first people killed by police that day. He was a 13-year-old boy named Hector Peterson. And it became nearly impossible to ignore the brutality of the apartheid regime. In the years that followed, more and more countries exerted political and economic pressure on South Africa to end apartheid. And it was due to the activism of those kids in Soweto. So every year, my students explore this history. And they look at the ways in which these South African students exercised their agency within an oppressive system that sought to silence them and deny their humanity. And invariably, my students draw comparisons between the South African kids' activism and their own power and promise as young people. They start to wonder about their own political agency. They debate whether they would be willing to risk their lives to ensure that future generations could live in a more just world. And they ask themselves whether adults like us will ever listen to their voices. So a few years ago, in the wake of Michael Brown's death in Ferguson, Missouri, my principal received an anonymous email from one of our seniors and informed him that the following day, students at our school were going to walk out and participate in a citywide protest in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. And at that point, staff at our school had a decision to make. Would we try to stop them from protesting? Would we use our authority and our power to try to control them? Or would we put into practice these principles of social justice and activism that we had been teaching them about? So the next day, most of the student body left school en masse, and they gathered on the lawn. And my favorite part was when one of the seniors jumped up on a picnic table and started going over safety expectations for all the younger kids. And as teachers, we gathered with them, and we listened, and we told them to stay safe. And then a whole bunch of the kids marched off to meet up with other kids from other schools downtown, and the rest of the kids went back inside the school. And those who had chosen to stay at the school that afternoon talked about the Black Lives Matter movement, debated the merits of protest, and went on with class as scheduled. And those who walked out participated in a citywide student rally and raised their collective voice for justice. But no matter where they had chosen to spend their afternoon, our students learned really valuable lessons that day. They learned that the adults in their lives would support them even as we worried for their safety. They learned that they didn't need adults to tell them how or when or where to organize. They learned that they were members of a community of young people with a shared vision for a more equitable society, and they learned that they had power within that society. And most importantly, they learned that events like the Soweto Uprising aren't ancient history, and they don't have to end in tragedy. And that's what education as a tool for social justice can look like. And our kids are ready for this kind of work. In 2015, there was a survey of college freshmen. 8.5% of them said that there was a very good chance they would participate in a student protest sometime during their college career. Now, that might not seem like a really impressive figure, but it's actually the highest number of kids to say this since 1967. And in that same survey, 75% of them said that helping other people who are having difficulty was a very important or an essential life goal. And again, that's the highest number of kids to say that since the late 1960s. And research shows us that activism doesn't just follow from helping students develop the skills that I talked about earlier. It actually works the other way too. It helps our students build skills like critical thinking and leadership. And it correlates positively with their political participation and their civic engagement and their commitment to their communities later in life. So in other words, students are telling us that social justice is important to them. And researchers are telling us that it helps students learn. And so now it's just up to us to listen. And that's where this gets really, really tricky. One of the students who participated in the Soweto Uprising in 1976 said later that that event represented divorce between Black children and their parents. Because their parents had grown up under apartheid. And they knew how dangerous it was to speak out. They'd seen their friends and their family members, their political leaders like Nelson Mandela, jailed or killed for resisting. They wanted their kids to lay low and stay safe. And when our kids threatened to walk out at my school, the adults in our community were really conflicted too. Some of us worried that they would encounter violence when they left the school. And other people fretted that, they wouldn't really know why they were walking out and they would defeat the purpose of the whole thing because we don't give them enough credit. And other people worried, and this included a bunch of students' families, they worried that we didn't do enough to stop them from walking out, that we should have done more to keep them in school. And all of this fear that we have as adults of getting this wrong makes a ton of sense. But despite our fear, we have got to prove to our students that we will listen to their voices. It's up to us to inspire confidence in them that they do have the power to affect change. It's our responsibility to ensure that they're equipped with the tools to insist on a more equitable society and then get out of their way as they work to apply those tools to situations that they care about. Living up to that vision will require creativity and flexibility. It will require standing against those who seek to silence or delegitimize dissenting voices. And it will require accepting the fact that sometimes we will be the ones our students rebel against. Sometimes they will point out ways in which systems that we have designed or in which we are complicit are actually contributing to inequity. It will be uncomfortable and it'll be painful as they push us to question our own assumptions and beliefs. But what if we change the way we think about rebellion in our kids? Because really, when our students rebel, when they thoughtfully push against our ideas, when they question whether there's a better way than the way that we've designed, what if we chose to see that as a sign that we're doing something right, and that our kids are becoming liberated? I know it would be easier if our kids' critical thinking skills manifested in more convenient ways. On their standardized tests or their essays, it was very neat and clean, right? But convenience and justice don't often go hand in hand. When our students think critically about the world around them, they learn to become engaged citizens who will question injustice when they see it and work to change it. And welcoming rebellion into our schools is going to require some rethinking about what learning looks like, because there's this misconception that if we give students any wiggle room, they're going to walk all over us and pure chaos will ensue. And if we expect students to just sit silently and passively receive knowledge from us, then yeah, their voices are always going to feel overwhelming. But if we accept instead that learning is sometimes messy, that it requires opportunities to discuss and brainstorm and get it wrong and try again, if we accept that students dislike chaos as much as the rest of us and they want to learn when they come to school, then we can set up schools to facilitate that kind of education. Imagine schools where adults are thought partners, helping students make wise decisions but not always supplying the right answers. Imagine schools where we trust students to make choices and allow them to experience the consequences of those choices. Imagine schools where we make it our mission to treat students as individuals, with all of the uncertainty and the messiness that is bound to come with that. Imagine schools where we believe the writer Rebecca Solnit, who wrote that activism itself can generate hope. These aren't mythical or idealistic visions. I know that those of you in this room know that. Teachers all over the country are already pushing the boundaries of what teaching and learning look like with amazing results for kids. And we know they're doing that in charter schools, they're doing that in traditional public schools, they're doing that in private schools. There are teachers sitting in this room right now today who are doing this work. There are countless models for teachers who want to get better at helping students learn in a more authentic, engaging, and empowering way. I was reading this book by Ted and Nancy Sizer. It's called The Students Are Watching, and in it, they argue that the work of education is often framed as a collection of nouns, like respect and honesty and integrity. And those nouns, they say, sound really impressive, but too often they fail to actually mean anything in practice. But verbs, they write, are active, no less demanding, but requiring constant engagement. They're not structures, but rather engines. And so as I read that, I wondered, how can we turn the noun of justice into an engine driving our work as teachers? What's the verb form of justice? I've decided maybe the answer lies in the words of Dr. Cornel West, who wrote that justice is what love looks like in public. Love is a noun and a verb. School has to be bigger. It has to mean more than I teach my subject. School has to be about teaching people to change the world for the better. And if we believe that, then teaching will always be a political act. We can't be afraid of our students' power, because their power will help them make tomorrow better. But before they can do that, they have to have opportunities to practice today. And that practice should start in our schools. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sydney, for sharing your story with us. It's a great milestone for the charter school community to have you recognized as the first charter school teacher to be named National Teacher of the Year. And we're very excited that you were able to join us here. My name is Mike Embry. I'm the Associate Vice President of Program Development at Inside Track. In case you haven't heard of our work, Inside Track is a student success coaching organization that helps students across the country build the skills and knowledge needed for success in and out of the classroom. We're working with an increasing number of high school students to share the knowledge they need to take advantage of their college experience. We recognize that this support is especially important for first-generation, low-income, and other underrepresented students that often have few college graduates in their social network that can provide advice. We work to close that gap and ensure that all college-bound high school students have the resources, mentorship, and support to successfully enroll in college. Through this work, our coaches have seen firsthand the power of showing students the options that are available to them in their future. With this in mind, I'm honored to introduce someone who helped launch an organization that has, perhaps more than any other, helped students around the world discover careers and pathways for their futures that fit their passions and goals. Mike Marriner. After graduating from college, Mike didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. So naturally, he and two friends bought a barely operable RV, freshened it up with some green paint, and decided to travel the country asking people who do what they love how they figured it out. 15 years later, that road trip has become Roadtrip Nation, a nonprofit and TV series on public broadcasting dedicated to helping students find career and life fulfillment. Please help me welcome Mike to the stage.
How's everyone doing today? We are excited to present to you, I guess I am excited to present to you today. And then the theme of this conference, Dream Big, is kind of perfect for Roadtrip Nation, not just because we have 9 36-foot huge green motorhomes, but essentially that's really what we're trying to do with students, is helping them get a broader vision of what's possible for their futures. And I wish I could say that Roadtrip Nation, Mike made it sound all kind of fancy and professional, but I wish I could say it started as this perfect set idea, that we were doctoral students with this idea for Roadtrip Nation. And today it is one part media organization, one part education organization. We have our PBS series in 60 million households every year. But what most people don't know is we also have the Roadtrip Nation education platform, which is a database of over 5,000 videos of people talking about different career pathways to help, in particularly underrepresented students who haven't had the most role modeling opportunities, get a broader vision for what's possible for their future. But all this started 15 years ago when me and 2 buddies in school really didn't know what we wanted to do with our lives, and probably had a similar experience as I'm sure some of you at some point. How many people took the Myers-Briggs test at one point to kind of help them figure out what they wanted to do? And this, disclaimer, this is an amazing tool. We use it at Roadtrip Nation. We have 96 employees now. Everyone goes through it every year. I am an INTJ, something like that. But as a career exploration tool, taking that when you're in school to say, go forth and do one thing. In my case, I think it was like engineer or something like that. So naturally, I majored in natural science in college, but realized pretty quick once I got into it that I had attention issues as a kid. And that I had a laboratory internship the summer after my junior year and learned pretty quick that I had a hard time, sitting still. And so essentially, and I remember one of my natural science teachers saying, okay, there are 4 things you can do with a natural science degree. You can be a researcher, go to med school, teach, or be a pharmaceutical sales rep, something like that. And I remember at that moment thinking, is the workforce and kind of the opportunity of career pathways for my future really limited to those 4 things? And so we essentially had this idea to get an old beat-up motorhome. As Mike said, it was a 1984 Fleetwood Pace Arrow. It was falling apart all across America. And we essentially, traveled across America and spent 6 months of our senior year booking cold calls with people in different career pathways and asking them how, if we could sit down with them when we came through town and ask them how they got to where they are today. It was a little project that kind of turned into this much bigger thing. And so long story short, we ended up doing this trip. We interviewed someone in New York City who knew a writer for Forbes magazine. Forbes did a really small article on our road trip, which got the attention of an editor at Random House. So we ended up having the opportunity to write a book about Road Trip Nation. That was like the first Road Trip Nation thing to come out probably 14 years ago now, a long time ago. And when it didn't sell that well at first, but we were like proud. We could tell our parents we wrote a book or something, and go home for Thanksgiving. People were like, oh, okay, good. Now you can whatever. But essentially, around that time, that's when they put us on a media tour, and they booked us on the NBC Morning Today show. And that was kind of like the big lucky moment for it. And not because of anything that we did. We had never been on television before. It was Lester Holt was the interviewer, and it was 6 a.m. New York time, which was 3 a.m. California time where we're from. And the lights went on, and we froze. We completely froze. And I think Lester Holt saw that, so he spoon-fed he's like, so you went on a road trip across America and interviewed all these people. Like, yep, yeah, and he's like, and it's a book, and you can buy it on Amazon. Yes, yeah, and So the book came out, it started to do well, and around that time we started visiting schools and community centers across the country. And that was really when we had our epiphany for Road Trip Nation, that we were not unique, that there were students all across the country really hungry for more visibility of different pathways to see what they could do with their future. And particularly for students from underrepresented backgrounds who grew up in places like California Central Valley, where we did a lot of our early work with Road Trip Nation, a little town called Orosi in southeast of Fresno. Students didn't have those types of visibility, and especially with a workforce that is changing so fast, we started to realize that, the book wasn't really enough. It was inspiring people, and people were buying it, but when we were meeting students, we realized they wanted to have their own opportunities, maybe to not live in an RV and go across the country, but to get more visibility to what was possible for their future. So that's when we started to think, could this be something bigger? Could it be a movement or a platform or a program that gave students that chance to explore the world and see what was possible with their future? So early on, we had met the president of MTV and kind of concepted this idea for putting students on road trips. We were excited for the chance to pay it forward, put other students on road trips, but as we got down the path, they wanted to vote people off the motorhome, which did not go well. We were young and naive and thought, we were trying to help our generation, but how do you help students if you're voting them off the motorhome? So it was just not a good fit. But people always ask us, how did we end up at PBS? And we said, well, PBS came to us and said, if you come to PBS, you can do 3 things. You can do mission-based programming. You don't have to, vote anyone off the motorhome. You can have longevity here. You're not going to be on billboards or anything, but you can do this for decades if you really believe in it. And number 3, you can maintain the rights to all the content you produce. And so the third thing ended up being really, really important, and what in the last 5 years has allowed us to partner with organizations like Inside Track and the College Board and others to be able to bring our content to students in lots and lots of other ways if they don't have the lucky chance to be in the green RV. And so what I'm gonna show for you guys today is a little bit of footage from some of our recent Road Trip Nation trips. So every single summer, students, Road Trip Nation students, apply for the chance to go on the road and interview people from career pathways all across the country to learn how they got to where they are today. And now, because we have the Road Trip Nation education platform, all of those road trips are topical on either certain industries that we see represent the future of work and in the future workforce, to make sure that we're helping create a feedback loop for students that maybe have a hard time seeing what the workforce looks like today, or they can be specific social interests or specific hurdles that students might be facing. And if there's one key learning that we've learned from Road Trip Nation over the years, is that in order to help students dream big about their future, they need to see people like them in those career pathways. If I'm a young woman from California Central Valley thinking about being an engineer someday, I need to see other women in engineering across the country so that I get a sense of not only what's it like to be an engineer, but there are people like me in this field who came from where I came from, overcame the obstacles I had to overcome. And so because of that, we design all of these road trips topically. Last year we did a Women in Science road trip because we were hearing that enormously from students that it wasn't enough for them to just understand what careers in engineering are like. And so all of these road trips then feed back into the database. So one road trip I'm really excited to show you in particular is a new trip that is being released on PBS this week. It's all focused on first-generation college-going students. And I know a lot of you guys in the room are helping students from underrepresented backgrounds get broader visions for what they can do. So we partnered with former First Lady Michelle Obama and her Reach Higher initiative to put 3 students on the road last summer. And they interviewed people all across America who were also the first in their families to go to college. And the neat thing about this is that not only was there the 1-hour film on PBS, as I'll show you just a snippet of that in a second, but all of these individual interviews of people in various career pathways, from people that work for the National Park Service to track athletes to assistant principal of Houston ISD here in Texas to Jeffrey Canada, share their stories of where they were at, not only when they're in their fancy careers today, but where they were at before they found their roads in life. And so I will show just a trailer here. I'm going to come back up.
It blows my mind. I was like, here we are on the other side of the U.S., but, just 20 days ago, we were looking at huge skyscrapers.
We're such different people and coming from such different places.
Or we don't think they're going to hop on a bus and they're going to interview the best of America. That's happening every day.
Nature is something I don't see a lot of in city life in New York.
Meeting people that have had diversity.
And went on to college to do incredible things in our community, but also in our own life.
We have the one and only Roland.
It's really amazing. It's really good.
I'm going to be a freshman in college next year.
Growing up, it was not easy to get into college. I had a lot of things that were put in my way.
Freshman year of high school, I slipped. I didn't know what else to do other than adapt to my environment.
Your environment, if you can't step back and gain some perspective, you don't know what's doing.
I heard so much in the past. Everyone expected me to be submissive.
You are in this space where you're functioning just to make it to the next day.
Well, how did you decide that that's no longer fine who you were?
I wasn't expecting such a story. So real.
Not what I was expecting at all.
I get like a level of excitement when I hear that someone else has gone through a similar situation as me. When I'm confident, I know what you need. Every person in their life deals with some sort of obstacle, and that's powerful.
It's hard to talk about, but it's like, never talked about it.
I'm just trying to stay positive.
Because, there are days where it's hard for me, to continue.
Beating the odds is about attitude.
It's about continuing pushing forward.
So that is a little quick sneak peek. And we're really excited about that. So you're one of the first people to actually really see that. And it is going to be debuting on PBS this month. But more importantly, whenever we shoot content on a road trip, we're post-producing so much more content from that trip than just goes on PBS. And from an educational standpoint, we're feeding into the database so that the next generation of students that come to that archive can see people like them who overcome similar obstacles that they've had in that database. And so it's become really important for us as we think about helping students dream big for their futures. The theme for this conference is how do you give them a sense of all the different high growth opportunities that await students in the world today. And that's becoming more and more hard because the world keeps changing so much every year. Every year we go out, we have 9 huge green motorhomes. Only 4 are really operating at one time just for kind of rotating and maintenance purposes. But the workforce changes every summer. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a completely new thing. So how do you help students get visibility to that and map towards that? And so, one of the things is looking at what are some of those opportunities and industries, but helping them, again, see it through the lens of people who are like them in those pathways. So we did a road trip focused on computer science a couple of years ago. And I'm just going to play this one really quick here, too. And this is this is an awesome example where, one of the students on the road trip, I remember when we were, preparing for the trip, she said, Robin, she said, I'm passionate about coding. I stay up all night long coding, but I've never seen someone that looks like me in the computer science field. I'll never forget, because we partnered with Microsoft on this, and one of our program partners at Microsoft was down at the office today when we were at that day when we were launching the road trip. She goes, we have an entire club of women computer science programmers at Microsoft. Like when you're in Seattle, come through and get pizza. There's like 100 of us up there. And I remember that one sense of just like, just having an understanding that, again, there was people like her, allowed her to have a larger vision for her future. So let's play this really quick here.
I have this picture I love of me and all the other kids in my computer science class in high school. It's literally like all boys. And then me in my brick, pink flowery shirt in the middle. Do I wish there were more people that looked like me that could like actually relate? Like, of course, obviously.
Computer science made me understand the magic, how magic works. Everybody sees their phone works, but nobody knows what's going inside the program that's happening. I've always been interested, but like my family, I don't have anybody that works in the technology industry.
So last year we did 12 of these road trips. And the neat thing about that is that we were able to go deep on a number of different industries like cybersecurity, tech, the future of design with Autodesk. But we also did so many different social interests and issues that students face with. We did a veterans road trip for returning service members. We did a we did a road trip focused on students with learning and attention issues, where they interviewed people in career pathways all across America that had learning and attention issues. And for example, a lot of entrepreneurs have learning and attention issues, and they call it a learning difference, because then it's not just necessarily something that might make you not good for being an engineer or a biologist, but it actually makes you actually kind of good at like building stuff like organizations on road trips or something like that, which is what I now tell my parents. But we also did a road trip focused on dreamers, DACA students. We had 3 DACA students in the RV last year, road tripping around America, interviewing people who are first-generation Americans as well, talking about their pathways as they were first-generation Americans. And so all of this content together, we had a really reflective moment about 4 or 5 years ago where we realized that we could never put every student in America in a motorhome to go across the country. And it made us just kind of pause for a second and say, what is our mission? And we realized that our mission was to not just put students on road trips. That was always more a means to an end. Our mission was to give them more visibility to what the workforce looks like today, and empower them to define their own roads in life. And we started to think, are there different ways by which we can do that? And so around that time, we had built up about a 35-person production studio that was mostly working on our PBS work. But we thought if we could refocus some of that capacity and build out what is today the Roadtrip Nation Interview Archive database, that could be a destination where any student could come from any part of the country to get more visibility to what was possible for their future. And so we spent about 5 years in very stubborn post-production, going through all of our road trips and essentially building what is today the Roadtrip Nation Interview Archive database. So even if a student is not lucky enough to live in the motorhome for a summer, and even if the students that were on the RVs want to see the outcomes of 15 years of all of these trips, this is almost like a little slice of what the world and what opportunities look like today for students from all walks of life. There are 5,000 videos in this database. So this was a massive 5-year project. And the neat thing about this is that it wasn't just about scale of the content, which is important, but all of these interviews were conducted by students. And so what we've seen is core to the Roadtrip Nation model that we didn't really realize how important at the time, but it wasn't about having a journalist in the motorhome interviewing people about careers. It's all students asking questions of people in career pathways about their journeys through life. And what you get from that is you get people talking truthfully and openly and honestly about their personal journeys. And especially in this age of social media that we all live in, with high student anxiety, people are whitewashing their lives and showing just the perfect parts of their life. Like, I'm sure if we looked at all of our LinkedIn profiles here, it's like, oh, I've had the perfect career trajectory. I'm manager of this, or educator of this, or vice principal of this. But the reality is that we all started in a pretty groveling place, I'm sure, working a couple jobs, waiting tables, paying off student loans, but none of that is broadcasted to students. So it shouldn't be surprising that students have high anxiety about what they're going to do with their life because they think that they have to have it perfectly figured out or else they're completely screwed. And so what we really try to focus on with this content is that people get real about their real personal journeys. And they talk about the early times, where they came from, their obstacles they overcome, the struggles they had to overcome. And that at scale and tagged based on all those themes and hurdles has become enormously important because then students can search based on themes that are relevant to them. So for example, you can look at someone like Jewel Burks. I love this one. Social entrepreneur, started this company called Part Pick. Let's just watch a little snippet of this.
There were definitely things where I thought, I don't know how I got here. Why am I here? You start to think, second guess yourself in your skills. And in entrepreneurship, it can get extremely depressing sometimes, raising money and how that was really challenging, and it continues to be a challenge. It's hard to get told no 100 times. It's like, well, is it me? You start to question yourself. So a big part of it for me has been to just know who I am. And it doesn't matter what anyone else is saying about me. It is something that I can do.
So she's an engineer/entrepreneur, but you can look at the long-form interview, but also all this shorter-form thematic content that's been tagged in lots of different ways. And the coolest thing is that we've actually been able to reverse engineer this. So from a student standpoint, students can now go through this tool and again, pick a few things that they're interested in, whether it's being creative, engineering, and say science. And a student can look through this lens of things that matter to them along multiple dimensions and get a sense of, helping them think big and have a broader sense of people like them with similar interests. And the neat thing about here is on the left, you have this kind of the content from the world of Roadtrip from 15 years. But on the right, this is a crowdsourced version of Roadtrip Nation that we'd also encourage all of you to go do. We had a partnership with the Gates Foundation a few years back where they said, can we leverage technology to essentially crowdsource Roadtrip Nation? And it was an interesting experiment because, could we inspire people who are in their career pathways today, like all of you guys, to come to essentially a digital storytelling platform, and even if the road trip doesn't come to you and visit your community and put you in the PBS series, would adults be willing to share their stories and kind of pay it forward to the next generation? And so for the last 3 years, we've undergone this massive campaign to kind of inspire adults to come to a new site we've launched called shareyourroad.com, where essentially people can come to share their stories. And so here's an example. Here's Adriana Ocampo. She never was interviewed by the Green Motorhome, but she came to Share Your Road, uploaded her story. And in terms of like the honest storytelling part about being truthful about not only her LinkedIn life, but like her, her actual journey. Here's her 3 circles: being creative, science, engineering. She works for NASA on the New Frontiers program. When she was young, her parents immigrated from Colombia to Argentina, then to Pasadena. Even as a child, I loved to go onto my roof and look at points of light in the sky. I ended up writing a letter addressed only to NASA. It's made its way where they wrote back. NASA sent me some Apollo 11 paraphernalia that crystallized my interest in space exploration. But in school, I wasn't encouraged to go to the sciences. Only boys could go to technical schools. We hear that all the time, as I said before. That's why we did the Women in Science road trip. When we eventually moved to America, my first question was, ¿Dónde está NASA? Luckily, my Pasadena high school gave me the opportunity to intern at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. 35 years later, I'm still working for NASA. Anything is possible. So you're getting into I love this story. I've never even met her, and this is the neat thing about this, is that when you set the table for people talking honestly about their personal journeys, it's not only a sense of catharsis, I think, for the people that are sharing their stories, but from a student standpoint, they get a sense of, okay, like, there's hope for me. There are people out there that overcame obstacles, that immigrated here from South America, and here's how they overcame it. And so we've been trying to tag that as specifically as possible. So in this database, you can see that she's first gen, and she's a woman in science. So in the back-end database, you can see that. So you can see in the future, we can actually surround students with examples of powerful stories of people like them who came from where they came from and are doing what they're doing today. So I guess that's really our message for everyone, is that just to essentially believe in the power of people's personal stories, and that everyone's story matters, and that for students, to help them dream big and give them a broader vision for their future, giving them the chance to see people like them in career pathways so that they can get a sense of not only visibility into specific careers, of course, in colleges and all that, but also a sense of, I can do this. There are people out there like me who came from where I came from, that overcame the obstacles that I overcame, because I'm sure there's lots of people in this audience. So thank you, and I'll be around for a little bit too. So.
Thank you, Mike, for sharing your story with us. I'm glad to be able to close out our conference today. On behalf of the Alliance and the Board of Directors, thank you for joining us in 2018. It's been an amazing 3 days, and I'm glad you could join us. This is a charter conference, though, so we can't leave without a bit of data about the conference. This year we had 4,000 attendees, 725 charter schools represented, attendees hailing from 43 different states, including more than 100 from overseas, 275 exhibits, and 125 sessions jam-packed with content. Before we close today, I want to challenge you and encourage you at the same time. I recall a few years ago at this very conference, we had a debate on stage about whether we were a movement or a community. I submit to you that's the wrong question. I posit that we're more like a revolution, because we are revolutionizing the delivery of public education, revolutionizing opportunities for students, and revolutionizing the very structures of public education itself. And the one thing I know about revolutions, I learned from one of my heroes, Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi famously described every revolution in history as one of 4 distinct stages. He said famously, first, they ignore you. Then, they ridicule you. Then, they fight you. And then, you win. Well, I can say with full confidence we are in stage 3 of the revolution. There's evidence in all of our states, and we are in this fight. So I encourage you to continue the fight, not just for people in this audience, but for our students, for our communities, for our country, and for our very system of opportunity that public education represents. I also want to thank all the National Alliance Conference Planning Team members, all the people behind the scenes who made this week a success. Please give them a huge round of applause for all the work they've done. And finally, I want to encourage you to make your plans today to join us in 2019 when we'll go back to the great city of Las Vegas for the 2019 conference. Austin lived up to its reputation this week, and I know that Las Vegas will do the same a year from now. So mark your calendars, June 30th to July 3rd, 2019. I will see you there. And with that, I hope everyone has safe travels back to your home states, and I hope you leave this conference feeling both empowered to dream big dreams. Thank you so much.
Bright light said it gonna set my soul, gonna set my soul.